Very, very happy. It's been too long. I get to interview one of the people I love the most in the industry,
Thanks,
Ted Price, president of Insomniac, here to talk about Fuse.
Yep.
So the game's gone through some transformations. It was once Overstrike, had a different aesthetic. It's changed. People seem to have the perception that, oh, it's another one of those realistic shooters. I did get a chance to play it. It seems to be far more consistent with the Insomniac ethos, and people may realize.
It is, and I think you have to play the game to really understand that we take things over the top with our weapons, with our characters, with our settings. And yes, we made some tweaks to the aesthetics, but it's still a very Insomniac game at its heart. And a lot of the DNA from our previous games like Resistance 2 and Ratchet come forward into this game.
Let's talk about the story, because I think that alone starts to say, yeah, this sounds like it has a little touch of Ratchet in it.
Yeah.
What is the setting and the plot of Fuse?
Well, you start out as part of this 4-character team called Overstrike, and you're sent into this base in the middle of the desert. Nobody knows about it, and it's where scientists have been experimenting with Fuse, an alien substance discovered in the 1940s. And just recently, they figured out how to not kill all their scientists through these experiments. It's a volatile substance. People die frequently in horrible ways, but they figured out how to weaponize it, and you get to pick up some experimental Fuse-powered weapons at the very beginning. But the reason you're going there in the first place is this base has gone dark, and this faction called Raven is after the source of Fuse, which is buried in this base. And at the very end of this first level, they actually airlift it out. And it's all, again, over-the-top, fun, Insomniac type stuff. But it is driven by this presence of this alien substance, which you see used more and more in the game.
Well, and also alien substances, as they are known to do, allow for you guys to indulge what you're really known for, which is really odd weapons.
Yes.
You have 4 characters. It is a co-op game. We can get to that. But there's some very unique weapons that are unique to the characters in it.
Yeah, and so when we came up with the characters themselves, we tried to think about first what kind of weapons would fit them. We don't want to have 4 characters that look the same, have the same backstories, and have the same weapon. Not very much fun when you're talking about a 4-player co-op game. We wanted very distinct archetypes, personality-wise and in terms of their function in the game. So Dalton is our tank. He has this mag shield, which is the result of combining ferrofluid and Fuse. And it creates this...
You make that sound so convincing. Like, of course, yes.
That makes sense, right? Physically plausible. And he creates this giant shield, which he can hold up, catches any incoming projectiles, and then builds up kinetic energy, which can be released in a blast that liquefies any enemies in front of him. But what's better is he protects his teammates behind him who can fire through the shield. Then we have, also, I forgot to mention this, he can unlock an ability which allows him to drop copies of the shield. So in an ambush situation, like you and I were playing recently, he can actually keep the team pretty safe. Yeah, and it's again, really useful, especially when you're under heavy fire. Naya Devereaux, who is our stealth specialist, she can actually disincorporate and flank, so she becomes the one people look to when you need to flank enemies. However, she's got this great weapon called the Warp Rifle, which is the result of combining antimatter and Fuse. And when you coat enemies with this mixture, you can trigger these singularities, these black holes, which tear enemies apart but send out these rings of expanding matter. And if you do it right, you can coat multiple enemies with this mixture and set off a chain of black holes, which is your experience.
Yeah, which is also just it's visually pleasurable, I have to say, because you know you're doing something right.
Not anything you would find in real life, but you know, we're taking liberties with these weapons. And there are a couple more which I can go into if you like.
Well, maybe we'll move on to actually one thing, which is just the combat itself. It's a cover-based shooter, but as you've already described in 2 of these weapons, that would sound very, very powerful. So what are you sort of setting up in terms of numbers of enemies and enemy types so that, if you have this dynamic range of offensive power that you can really put it to good use?
So there are a lot of different enemy types in the game, and they're aggressive. They will flank you, they'll try to eliminate cover, and they will keep your head down. And you have to use cover, and you have to be clever about how you approach each of these combat setups, because sometimes you're dealing with snipers and with charging enemies. Sometimes you're dealing with mini bosses who are not your typical mini bosses. They're moving very quickly across the battlefield. Sometimes you're dealing with 1 or 2 enemies who are just really smart, who are going to figure out where you are and blink into existence and take you out. So every combat setup offers different challenges mentally, but also different ways to approach it as a team. And because you can leap between your characters at will, jump into each one, there are a lot of different ways to think about how you're going to take on groups of enemies.
So people know, and it's quite impressive, you can switch on the fly between any of the 4 characters if you're playing by yourself or if you don't have all 4 characters.
Correct. If you have
4 people,
4 humans,
play,
right?
Yes, yeah.
As long as you have 1 bot in the game, you can always leap to available bots. And this is really something we argued about at Insomniac for a while. Because the tradition is, if you have an RPG or MMO, once you make your character choice, you're locked, right? And the assumption is that's good. Players want that, but we decided no. Let's free things up and let people experience all 4 characters whenever they want, just so that it keeps the game fresh.
And also, you get to sort of use those various weapons, some of which have some really good applications in very particular situations.
That's exactly right. There are places where every one of these characters shines. If you're Dalton with the mag shield, in an area that doesn't have cover, let's say it's a bridge, and there's no cover, and you got enemy fire coming in from the front, having him go out in front with the shield is awesome. It's really, really useful. However, if there's a sniper situation, and you and I experienced a bunch of guys on turrets, right? Mm-hmm. Where you can't get to those guys, but Jacob has an arc shot with a trap capability. So we can fire bolts, these liquid mercury bolts, into the wall behind these turret-wielding enemies and fry them by activating the trap function.
Yeah, exactly. Just
like that, right? That's the kind of thing that you find in most games.
You make it sound so matter of fact. I love it. So there's also a lot of RPG elements in the game. There's character growth. How does that work, especially if you're playing alone and you can be moving between the characters?
Well, first of all, you earn experience in the game like you would in an RPG. So when you kill enemies or accomplish objectives or even find XP boosts in the environment, you add to your XP bar. And when it hits a certain threshold, you level up. And there are lots of levels.
And it's not unique to a particular character.
Well, it is actually. Each character has his or her own experience point pool. And so each character is leveling up separately. And when you level up, you get a skill point to spend in that character's skill tree, which, as you saw, is a relatively complex tree of abilities with multiple levels where you can begin unlocking stuff. Now, each character has unique skills to unlock, and then there is some crossover between skills in those 4 different skill trees. But again, every character is leveled on his or her own. So if you like to leap back and forth between characters, you can kind of level them all up at the same time. Or if you want to stick with one character, you can start really building that character and then come back to the others later. Now, one question we get all the time is, well, doesn't that kind of screw yourself? If you play the entire game as Naya and you want to come back later and play Dalton, what do I do? We actually give the bots experience boost as well. So you will have points to spend. They will not progress as quickly as characters you're playing, but they will progress.
And of course, it is a co-op game
as
well.
True. Yeah.
So when you're playing with other people, is it still set up so you can leap between the characters, or do you kind of is it built with the idea that with 4 people you're going to stick with the one you've chosen at the beginning of the session?
Yeah, if you're playing with 4, you choose your character, and they're going to choose their characters, and you're in.
That's good, because that could create fights.
It can, right? Yeah. And so if I was able to knock you out of your character, I'm not sure if you want to play with me anymore.
Let's not experiment with that kind of design just yet. But there's also a combo system in terms of how you're playing, I guess, with your friends or with the bots, if you use your weapons in concert with one another.
So the weapons are actually designed to be functional together, and because they are so different in terms of their functionality, crowd control, AoE, distant, short-range blasts, you can use your weapons together to take down enemies or groups of enemies. And when you do that, then all players get points. And we have about 60 different combinations that we show off in the game. And when, say, you and I are working together and you crystallize a bunch of enemies, and then I use the arc shot to take them out, well, I'm going to get a dark shatter. That's going to be the label that comes up, and you and I are both going to get points. Let's say that all 4 players work together, because it's possible to combine all 4 weapons at once. All of us get points, and we get different levels of experience points depending on how much damage each of us did individually.
And the game is coming out quite soon? May 28th. May 28th. Well, I'm quite excited. It's just great to see you again. I hope this game gets us to do this one more time before it's launched. So, Ted,
thanks a lot, Adam.
Thanks so much.
Okay.